If you want a juster, fairer society, you need rules that never change. Bitcoin is the answer to that. I believe that Bitcoin will hit a new all-time high in 2024. Welcome to Wealth Busters. Today's episode is me, Matt McKeever. And so we're essentially going to be following along with the choose your own adventure that is my life. If you guys didn't know, I sold all my real estate in 2021. We're talking hundreds of units, completely divested from that asset class. And I've been dedicating myself to better understanding Bitcoin, as well as trying to put my time to more effective and efficient uses to be a net contributor to society. I hope you guys really enjoy this episode, but anyways, let's get into it.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you're spending your days right now?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to dive into that. So essentially the TLDR on how I spend my time these days is focused on usually one or two passion projects. So those will be me studying a certain time in history, studying a certain aspect of economics or politics, sociology, whatever kind of just catches my fancy. Then beyond that, I try and spend, 10 plus hours a week studying Bitcoin or Austrian economics. That's a very big aspect of what I'm trying to focus on these days. And then beyond that, I've got the Citadel, which is a private resort retreat up in Northwestern Ontario. And I kind of manage the manager and just kind of focus on some BD related to that. Beyond that, we were mentioning right before the call, recently I've been working with a local food bank and just trying to help them maybe find some efficiencies or ways to scale more effectively. So just taking some of the experiences I had in real estate and my different businesses and now applying it to different niches, I guess.
Cool, man. And thanks for sharing all of that. I think most people are listening to this podcast, they know you from real estate. So can you kind of tell us a little bit what happened in real estate so that you sold everything, or maybe from my understanding, you sold everything, moved up north, bought Citadel, and kind of...
What was the thought process behind that?
What was the thought process? What happened there? And then now that looking back, is that a good decision?
Yeah, I'm happy to chat about that. And I'll go relatively in depth. You guys pull me out if you think I'm going too deep on a given area. So first things first, I think when it comes to, an individual making a major change, whether it comes to like a personal habit or, a complete switch in their lifestyle, we often want to look for one moment in time or a tipping point. But I think that what actually happens is it's much more like the hero's journey that you'll see with Joseph Campbell with storytelling, where there's multiple calls to adventure and you actually overlook those, you turn those down, you decide to stay within your comfort zone or the world rather than stepping out into the great unknown. And I think very similarly for myself with real estate. So if, for anyone that's an OG listener of mine back in 2016, early 2017, my YouTube channel was called Matt McKeever because one, I wanted it to be sharing and documenting my journey. And at that point in time, it was real estate oriented. But secondly, because I didn't want it just to be about real estate. Really, real estate was just the vehicle towards financial independence. So I imagine your audience knows it, but FIRE, financial independence, retire early. It was one of the most important aspects I built my life around, was trying to have as many degrees of freedom when it came to my personal finances. And, there's a multitude of reasons that, I decided on that, but I'll jump past that. So, from 2010, when I bought my first rental property till 2020, I was just, let's see how far I can grow this, right? From 2010 to 2016, it was all about being able to reproduce my personal income so that I could quit my day job as a financial controller for a publicly traded pharmaceutical company and just really be able to dictate my own time, right? So I think there's a lot of individuals that are attracted to financial independence because they don't want to do monotonous work. Maybe there's certain inefficiencies that really grind their gears at work, or maybe they just want to be able to study passion projects. And that definitely was myself. So along that journey, I just kept doing things and they would snowball and they would get bigger. And I ended up, at the start of 2020, when COVID hit, with a lot of employees, in my opinion, right? Like we had a dozen plus employees between the different businesses, probably another dozen plus contractors. I was in the process of starting up two other large businesses at that point in time. And it was honestly just a lot. So first things first, I didn't necessarily set out for my organizational structure to look the way it did, but it just kind of organically grew in that direction. I get interested in something, I think I could do it better than everyone else. So I would double down on it, get some success. And then at that point in time, my ego would be kind of caught up in proving that I was the best, or at least capable and able to execute on that. So I ended up with a lot of different businesses, my attention very fragmented, and I'd always been anti-big government. I feel like I came by this honestly during the mid-aughts and the Ron Paul revolution. For the younger people in your audience, I think Ron Paul is the only honest politician that's probably ever existed in the history of humanity, and certainly in the history of the United States. And so he was all about libertarianism. He was the one that really started the movement to audit the Fed, which is the Federal Reserve of the United States, the central bank there. And so, I always had a chip on my shoulder when it came to central banks, regulators, governments, all that. As my businesses grew, I started constantly finding myself at loggerheads with different regulators, whether it's your local municipality over a zoning change or a heritage building or whatever the case may be. I found myself frustrated by the hoops I'd have to jump through with certain businesses in order to get, payroll and things of that nature. And so I think it was just an accumulation of a lot of these small different factors. And then obviously COVID hit, we had the lockdowns. I talked about COVID on my YouTube channel, and I saw our monetization just get nuked immediately. And I apologize for nuking your monetization right now, but it is what it is. And so at that point in time, I started having a lot of private conversations with people that I respected. And, some of these were mentors, some of these were business partners, some of these were just, acquaintances and people that I respected because of what they'd accomplished in their life. And everyone kind of behind the scenes was like, yeah, this shit's kind of fucked up, but I don't know, right? Like, you got to do what's good for the greater good or something. And this really just drove me crazy that in private conversations, people would say one thing, but publicly facing, I saw them not willing to take any risks with their brands, with their social media accounts, with potential business partners or money partners, right? And so, again, the whole reason I got into financial independence was for that FU money, right? And if I couldn't tell someone to fuck off, like, what's really the point of having that sort of money, in my opinion? Because money's really just a tool. And like anything, it can be used to our betterment or detriment. And unfortunately, it's such a shiny tool that I feel like a lot of people end up getting captured by it. So, I had friends that I met back in 2016 that were like, once I make $10,000 a month, that's it. I'm selling everything. I'm moving to Costa Rica, and I'm going to be on autopilot. And what ends up happening is, in the process of becoming the person that builds up $10,000 a month, you become, in passive income here, you become a completely different person. And so, to the point where you can almost not recognize your prior self. And during that process, oftentimes people just have, an expansion of their goals, and they're like, well, 10,000 is cool, but let's go for 20, let's go for 30. And I can think of one individual that, last time I spoke to him, he was like, well, and he in 2016 said $10,000 a month, and he was out. You guys can go deep into my YouTube and find it. And anyways, last time I spoke to him, he was like, well, 50,000, and then I'll peace out to Costa Rica. Again, there's nothing wrong with that, but there's this hedonic adaptation that a lot of us fall victim to without, consciously choosing it. And that was a big aspect of my YouTube channel and financial independence for me. It wasn't about sacrifice. It wasn't about being cheap. It was about being frugal and cost conscious, right? It was really just about conscious consumption and focusing on investing your time, your money, your energy into things that you believed had a disproportionate value to yourself, right? Like a net positive exchange. And so as I was kind of like navigating all these different emotions and thoughts, I doubled down on learning about Bitcoin and central currencies, central banking, all that stuff. And just everything I'd learned back with Ron Paul, came flooding back. I was like, yeah, this. I don't understand what's going on here. And then one of the things that really felt like a tipping point for myself personally was when Tiff Macklin came out, and I may misremember this, but I think it was August or September of 2020. He said, interest rates are going to be low for a long time. And I thought to myself, shit, I must be retarded because I don't understand how that's possible. Like, it literally just did not compute. I was like, everything I understand about money, about inflation must be wrong because these experts, the smartest people in the room, are saying this one thing, and yet everything I feel like points to something else. I must be missing something serious here. I found myself constantly frustrated by certain money partners and things like that because they were concerned that I was destroying my personal brand with my political opinions and things like that. Certainly a very vocal segment of my audience made it well known that I should stay in my real estate lane and not necessarily cover things outside of that. And again, unfortunately for those people that joined me midway through my financial journey on YouTube, like they didn't understand that, again, the whole goal was like F you. And so the same way that it was like F you at age 31 to quit the rat race and just do my own thing full time, like I was more than happy to say F you to all my businesses, all my tethers. And it also, you know, you do have these moments of reflection if you've built a strong bond with your team where you're like, I can afford to say F you, but can every one of my employees, right? Are my employees going to be cool if we can't make payroll because I said some bad words on YouTube, we got demonetized, and now we don't have necessarily the funds or the income that we expected because historically speaking, we'd always been fine in that case. And so I realized it was better for me to try and plan a soft landing for everyone that I cared about. So that was like employees, business partners, things of that nature. So I kind of approached it. And so you were right, Cody, at the start of this. I did sell all my real estate. I divested of all my businesses. I've got a little bit now again, but that stuff's more accidental than necessarily on purpose. It's no part of a grand vision yet. But so, I gave certain employees and managers options to like buy me out to the businesses or simply take them over if they weren't profitable. I had other business partners buy me out and real estate investors that were invested with me. I kind of gave them like a shotgun type option of like, hey, you can buy me out or we can sell this together. I don't really care. If you say a price that's even the ballpark of reasonable, I want to leave on a high note. So I want to leave knowing that every person that came into business with me made money because I still think that my reputation precedes me. I'd like to think that. And I think that, or certainly regardless of what one thinks of my reputation, I'm very proud of it. And so I want to maintain it to my personal standards. And so that was really when I divested. So that was, going in late 2020 into early 2021, just because all that stuff takes way longer than you expect. And so by the end of 2021, I was completely out of everything. Now, I didn't perfectly time the market, but that's not necessarily what I set out to do. And one of those other things that was kind of nagging me as I continued to learn more about Bitcoin and central banking and things of that nature was really understanding how perverted, in my opinion, the real estate markets become with financialization. So if anyone's not familiar with that term, I really encourage you to Google it because this isn't natural what we're experiencing here, particularly in Canada, but the Western world in general when it comes to real estate. The commodification of it, again, real estate can be a productive asset. I believe that when I was buying real estate, I was buying underperforming assets, bringing them up to their highest, most efficient, best use, which usually was a profitable endeavor, right? So either I was dramatically increasing the cash flow or dramatically increasing the perceived value or appreciation in the property. But I couldn't help but look back on all my successes and wonder how much of it was Matt and how much of it was the market. And again, that chip on my shoulder, I wanted to know with certainty that, I had actually hunted what I was eating rather than, maybe just got lucky at the food trough. And so again, kind of leaving that stuff behind, leaving on a high note, I warned a lot of my business partners that I was and investors that I was concerned about the future of interest rates, but I literally told them, you probably shouldn't listen to me because everyone else seems to disagree with me, particularly the central banks. They're the ones that make the rules. So at the end of the day, like if the referee or your coach tells you something, I'd usually listen to the referee. 9 times out of 10, that will be the right choice. And so, it took a lot longer. I can't help but think, and I'm not comparing myself to this person, but it's an important lesson for individuals that want to be Cassandras or trying to predict the future. Michael Berry from The Big Short, a lot of people will be mildly familiar with him just because of the movie, but understand, and the movie showcased this a little, but like how close he came to being broken because the market could afford to be irrational far longer than he could afford to be solvent. And, had it even stretched out another year or two, we probably wouldn't know his story. He wouldn't be in the movie. He would just be, another victim of regulators and central bankers playing their games. So for myself, I just wanted to be removed from that system. And I wanted to be able to focus on things that I thought were actually like truly generating a net value for society. And again, that's a personal definition, right? I don't think that there's one perfectly abstract definition I can provide to you that we can all fit within that sort of square hole. But for myself, I've just always had this guiding North Star. And so it just really was telling me at that point in time, it was time to move on from real estate investing. My audience wasn't liking all the Bitcoin content and all the doomer or black pilled sociology commentary and political commentary. So again, I just felt like it was better to pivot hard rather than kind of have a slow death. I've watched some YouTubers really try and hold on to something they once had, and I kind of feel like that's a sad path to go as well.
100%. What I really like is your definition of like FU money and like financial independence. I think that definition is, it really tells a lot about like kind of like your character, in the way that like when I think of like FU money, or the typical person thinks of it, they're thinking like, oh, I want to have like all these watches and like, you know, look good and all this stuff and like not be able to work or anything. Whereas for you, you've kind of like made that definition into, I want to be myself fully. Like, I don't want to have to hide parts of myself. I don't want to have to do like jobs that like work that I don't enjoy. If I want to work, I want to do it in the realms that I actually want to learn in. And I really like that definition, because honestly, like when I think of financial independence, it's in that realm. It's being able to actually do stuff that you want to do, like unchallenged. You don't have to worry about like, you know, my opinions differ in public versus in private, and, you know, having to have that issue where it's like you have to hide parts of yourself, because that's like the hardest thing, I think, when it comes to the
like one big thing that again, I think a lot of us maybe, you know, are naive to, or simply we're too busy to look at, is the importance of social signaling. So there's a great book called The Social Animal. It's a long read, but for anyone that's interested, I recommend you check it out. But it essentially just explores what's the value of gossip, right? Like, you know, why does you and me talking behind Becky's back about how she's a slut, like, why do we actually do that? Is it just because we get some sort of like kick out of tearing someone down? And it's no, we're actually signaling to each other what we believe to be appropriate behavior. Now, again, for each different person and culture, that's going to look differently. But for myself, based upon my personal principles, it was important that I be able to signal that to my audience, or to anyone that cared about my opinion on the subject matter. And I didn't want to drag anyone unwillingly into my personal crusades.
Yeah. No, 100%. I think that's amazing. And I think the way you went about it too, it was very, like, it was very, very raw. Like, you just ripped the Band-Aid off. I think that's one of the important things, is being able to identify when you need to make that change, whether it's going from real estate to doing your own thing. I think that's the part right there that people don't really make the jump with, because they think they have to have this elaborate plan, when it's as easy as, you don't want to do this anymore. Figure out a way to just offboard everything and live your life, do what you want to do.
How often have you seen someone at a job they hate, but they're hanging on to it, and like their entire world becomes darker and bleaker because of it, because there's no longer that passion, and they think that they can maybe isolate that and it won't impact their relationships or their hobbies or the joy they have outside of work. But it's very rare I see someone be able to completely disconnect one aspect of their life and not have it influence the others.
Yeah. And we have this idea of like, don't do anything half-assed. And yet when it comes to that specifically, people half-ass it, even though we have a term for it in a negative way. So it's like, if you know, if you're doing something halfway, that it's not, you're not going to get the desired outcome, it's not going to succeed as much. It's like, why do we cling on to that? I don't know if it's hope, maybe it's just fear.
Aversion to loss, I think. You know, if you study psychology at all, humans are very scared of losing something versus gaining something. It's why so few people are risk takers. It's why I think being a risk taker in our society disproportionately rewards you. Now, again, there's certain social safety nets that as well make it even a better bet to be a risk taker in our society today. But certainly that fear of loss aversion, I think, holds a lot of people back from living up to their full potential.
For sure. Yeah, that's definitely a big one nowadays, because I've been seeing like just around my own network, like a lot of people are battling with the idea of like, should I work for myself? Like, you know, should I make the plunge? And it's like, well, you know, you've been doing the same thing every year and you're unhappy with it. It's like, at this point, you know, you're planning to work at this place, let's say until like retirement age, which is not a bad thing for some people. That's perfect for them. But when you're already voicing concerns at the age of like 26 that you're hating this route, it's like, try it out. You know, you have time to make up whatever income or to apply for another job. It's like, take the plunge, try something new. You might find you actually need to do a condensed amount of work in like maybe 10 years, and then you might hit that financial freedom. It's like, there was like this one quote where it's like, what was it? It's like a psychology one, I think. It's like talking about how a sociopath or a psychopath will try the same thing every day and hope for a different result. And it's like, I think we're all kind of low-key like psychopaths, because like we keep doing the same thing every year, hoping for a different result. And then it's just the same thing, the same repetition, where it's like, shift, try something new. And I know for myself, like that's what made me take the plunge into starting with my own business. And it was because, you know, I have time to make up that income. If let's say shit hits the fan completely. And, you know, like I become the worst person ever. I'm canceled. No way I can open a business. Like everything is shit. Like I have time until retirement to, you know, make up an income, find some other sources of revenue. Sorry. Yeah. Like I have time to do that. And I think that's something that a lot of like people in my network are battling with. They don't think they have the time to do that anymore. And it's like, look around, you have ample time. But one thing I'm really curious to pick your brain on is, so just hearing about like your story on how, you know, I'm the same way, short attention span. I like to try 1,000 different projects because you know what? I want to learn. Did you always have this type of risk appetite, like jumping from like real estate to crypto? And I know like you started like Project LB52, your own NFT collection. Like I would love to even hear about that and like how your journey with Bitcoin has been. Cause yeah, I know yesterday it jumped up a significant amount, which thank goodness my bank account's looking good.
Yeah, sure. So I guess in regards to my risk profile, by trade, CPA originally, right? So went through to be a chartered accountant at university and all that. So I I feel like I came with a very risk adverse profile initially, but then the way I would get comfort with any of the risks I would take is by really trying to distill down to what's the realistic worst case scenario. So when I decided to like leave my corporate life behind, I was like, what's the realistic worst case scenario? Okay, well, I'm making this income from revenue. Or from real estate and rentals. I'm pretty sure people will always need a place to live. Maybe they won't need to pay me necessarily the same amount today as they did yesterday, but the shelter is a business that's not going away anytime soon. So, you know, I literally just wrote down worst case scenario, what would I do? And I was like, well, you know, I only spend at that time, and I still spend probably less than this today, $2,000 a month. And, you know, that's just for kind of like personal food consumption and like honestly buying my nieces and nephews gadgets they don't need and stuff like that. So again, I know that there's a lot of discretionary spending there. If I had to cut to the bone, I'm spending $1,000 a month in a blink of an eye. I've got no hesitation that towards that. I know it's not going to impact my quality of life. So I literally wrote down in a journal that I think I still have somewhere. And I was like, I could, you know, buy a tent for $100 used on Kijiji, sleep in the tent and rent out my apartment in my fourplex. Right. And once I started mapping out all these things, it felt literally impossible for that worst case scenario to happen where I'm like, I have to turn to the social safety net. I have to turn to my personal safety net or whatever the case may be to fill the gap. So once I kind of knew that, I had a large, savings or like rainy day fund anyway. So wasn't that concerned about any of those things. So again, I like to think that I always try and position myself to take disproportionate upside risks, right? So I'm looking for where's there very little downside, but potentially a lot of upside. And again, I often miss the moonshots. Like one thing I've learned with time is only your haters are going to remember your mistakes. And honestly, none of us are that important to have consistent haters. So like you might have a fly-by hater that's like, hey, you know, I think what you're doing is a scam. I think you're the worst person in the world. I think all landlords should die. But like that person's not even going to stay with me for 5 years. So like that criticism just isn't a criticism that I take seriously. And so again, all the failures that I've made throughout my life, I came to understand life's just an iterative process. And the faster you can speed up those iterations between experiments, the better you are for it, right? So whether that's, you know, getting into real estate quicker, getting into personal development, getting into health, whatever the case is, you're much better to get started today and make mistakes today, because odds are you're going to have to make those mistakes at some point in time, or you're going to have to gain that wisdom somehow. And so for myself, I was just always like, okay, let's figure out worst case scenario and then let's jump in.
That's awesome. So you somehow turned something that was like really risky, somehow conservative at the same time. So it's like mitigating the unnecessary risk in a risky situation, which I think is awesome.
So few people like will actually sit down and write out a list of what's scaring them about something, right? So again, I saw this, like there was a period in my life where I was doing kind of financial coaching or giving people advice on how to build a real estate portfolio. And oftentimes I would know, like with a couple, there'd usually be a difference in risk profile between like husband and wife, right? One would be very aggressive, one would be more conservative. And the conservative one oftentimes couldn't really vocalize what the fear was. It was more just the fear of the unknown. And so if we could really just distill down, like, okay, let's get deep into this. Like, what are we actually scared of, right? Like, are you scared of your house being defaulting on your mortgage and having your home seized? Okay, well, like if you really want to, read up on how long it takes for the bank to foreclose on your house, right? Understand that like you have equity in your house, right? We broke it down. Your house would have to drop in half its value before you're going to be underwater on that mortgage. Your mortgage payments are this, it's locked in. And once you start getting into the details, most people are like, oh, okay, that elephant that seemed insurmountable, now I understand, I'm going to eat it one bite at a time.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Can I give this interview a little bit more depth? I love what you're sharing so far, Matt, but as you know, I'm Cody. A lot of time I don't track what people talk about. I want to know where they put their money. So do you mind sharing where you put your money now? I think that says everything to everyone. If you don't mind sharing that, because you're a CPA, you probably know, I'm guessing. You don't have to give me exact numbers, but just roughly percentage.
No, he's going to list his bank accounts every
rough percentage, right?
Yeah. So I think personally, it's very wise for everyone to be studying Bitcoin, and based upon the level of education that you've invested into Bitcoin, I think that should be reflective in the level of your net worth that's stored in that asset. So I'm not going to get into specifics. Anyone that's familiar with Bitcoin culture knows that rule number one about Bitcoin is never tell anyone about your Bitcoin. But certainly, I would strive to have a significant portion of my net worth in Bitcoin. Unfortunately, I live on a lake. There was a crazy boating accident. I lost all my keys, so I don't have any Bitcoin anymore. But I think that everyone should be actively studying Bitcoin. That's a joke for anyone that's not in Bitcoin culture. But yeah, I think that the only asset that I'm bullish on to infinity is Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw that huge jump yesterday. I got really excited by that because we were kind
of like, don't get caught up in price swings, because again, the goal of Bitcoin is to never sell your Bitcoin. I think that, again, everyone's on the journey, on their own personal journey. Everyone gets Bitcoin at the price they deserve. But I just really wish that more people would spend 10 to 20 hours to understand the basics of Bitcoin, understand the basics of central banks, understand the basics of fiat currency. What's been interesting to me over the last couple of years is people learning and beginning to understand about inflation, because it's hitting their personal bottom lines, right? It'd been since like the 80s or 90s since we really took inflation as a serious threat to our standard of living. But understand that like that's not a natural phenomenon. In fact, I would argue it's unnatural. I think that when you look back to some of the great thinkers of the 19th and 20th century, you can find quotes from industrialists. They're like, in the future, or futurists, they'll be like, you only need to work 5 or 10 hours a week because technology will be so great and, you'll be so rewarded for your efforts. And what people don't understand is that like you look at 1900, you were paying 0% income tax. There was 0% consumer taxes, right? Or goods and service taxes. There was almost no sort of property tax to speak of, things of that nature. And then you look at today, and the average Canadian spending 50% plus of their income on taxes. What's happened is that through both inflation because of fiat currencies, as well as the increase in the parasite class, the amount of the economy the government consumes, we're actually slowly being stripped away from a lot of the gains that we should be experiencing. But I'll circle back to your main point, Cody. Right now, the only assets that I'm invested in, I've got a token amount of RSPs. It's less than 20 grand. The only reason it exists is because I'm too lazy to go about and pull the money out. Back in my early 20s, I was really into drip investing. So I was doing like not synthetic drips, but real drips. So I was holding paper certificates for individual blue chip stocks here in Canada. Again, I'm too lazy to get rid of those. So there's maybe 20 to 40 grand there. I've got the Citadel, which is one of the businesses that I'm currently invested in. That involved a decent amount of capital there. We've done, hundreds of thousands of dollars in improvements to the property. And then beyond that, the rest of my allocation and any future allocation of my investments is going into Bitcoin.
Nice.
Wow. So majority of it is actually going into Bitcoin, your money, right? So like, so sounds like a lot of degen phrases. So before we go into the whole Bitcoin thing, talk about your project, other than just holding Bitcoin, you have other stuff. But I want to ask, for people who doesn't know, how does Citadel works? What does that really mean? And how does that business run?
For sure. So the Citadel specifically is essentially a private retreat resort, or it's an Airbnb. You can kind of frame it however you want. So, but essentially what it is I've got 22 acres up in northwestern Ontario near Kenora. It's about, if you're in London, Ontario, listening to this right now, you're looking at a 20 to 24-hour drive to get to me. So it literally middle of nowhere. We're about 4-hour drive from Winnipeg. I've got 8 cabins on the property. We've got a large lodge. We've got 500 feet of waterfront on a semi-private lake. So on our lake, there's less than 10 other cottages or inhabitants on the lake. So it really feels like we're pretty much just surrounded by nature, crown land, government land. So that property is just kind of I view it as a barbell strategy. So Bitcoin is my crazy optimistic play. It's, we literally can engineer our way out of any problem. Human ingenuity knows no bounds. Bitcoin's the answer. And then the Citadel is the opposite. The Citadel is the holy shit, we're over $1 trillion in debt here in Canada. Very soon, the level of maintenance just on that debt, of us just trying to pay the interest on it, will soon overtake our tax income. So either the government's going to have to default on debt, or they're going to have to start taxing us further, or something's going to have to give soon, right? We can't quantitatively ease our way into infinity. And so for myself, the Citadel was a way to have my sleep at night factor. There were certain people that I would talk to on their real estate investing journey, and they would choose to have their personal mortgage paid off. Not because it was the financially optimal decision, but because they were at such a luxurious point in their financial planning that they could afford that sort of indulgent for that sleep at night factor. And so for me, the Citadel is really my sleep at night factor. Again, I think it's going to be a profitable business. I think we're going to see local travel become more and more popular. I think that we're going to see international travel more and more demonized and potentially restricted. But again, if nothing else, I think it will become more costly in order for the average person to do it. So I do think that there's a strategic investment behind it, but it's primarily a personal decision to own that property. So that's what the Citadel is. For anyone that's curious, I know a lot of people aren't familiar with the name Citadel. Citadel actually just refers to the inner city. So, think of King's Landing, and where Cersei was, there was that inner fortress. That's what a citadel is. So it originally comes from Greek or Latin or something like that. And it became popular in freedom and gun culture, and eventually was adopted by Bitcoin culture as well. So I think that it's a term that your audience will hear a lot in the future. And I think that I was smart to plant my flag early in that respect.
Smart.
100%.
Are you actually renting out your Citadel? Are people paying you money? Is it on Airbnb anywhere? Can people find it?
So I originally made a unusual offer. Essentially, I offered anyone that followed me on a social media platform, you know what, join this private Discord about the Citadel. And if you want, you can come live there for free. I don't know what the deal is. We'll figure it out. I trust that you're capable of producing value. If you're crazy enough to say yes to me, I have to be crazy enough to say yes back. Realistically, most people are risk adverse. So very few people even considered it. Only one couple ended up deciding joining the property. And now they're kind of the live-in caretakers and day-to-day operators of the Citadel, which works out great for both of us. They're able to get financial stability, business and real estate mentorship for myself, while I'm able to have a property that literally just feels like my personal resort that I can show up to or leave at, a moment's notice without consequence. So other than their cabin, everything else is up for rent. We've got those fancy like glamping tents, and we've got a couple trailers, and we'll be putting up one of those geodesic like see-through domes soon too as well. So right now it's kind of like luxury camping, intentional vacationing for people that kind of want to just surround themselves in nature. It's a little woo-woo to talk about like forest bathing or surrounding yourself in nature for the average person. But I really do think there's value there. I don't think that we're necessarily designed as humans to spend all day in front of screens and then all night in front of screens as well. And I hope that the Citadel, we were very purposeful in the naming of it. Citadel Retreat, kind of a double entendre there in regards to end of the world, let's retreat there. Or the world goes on to be this wonderful, prosperous place. We can retreat there just to gain back a little of our sanity from the modern day world.
No, 100%.
But yeah, it is on Airbnb. It's renting out. I'm happy with the financial performance of it so far. I think that it's a niche that people are likely to see blow up as well, because, I don't know how deep into real estate you guys talk about, or whether you've talked already about the essentially demonization of Airbnb that's occurring across the board in North America. And this is a very well orchestrated plan. This isn't something that actually organically grew up grassroots. These are organizations that are well funded. They're attacking Airbnb. They're reducing an individual's freedoms when it comes to their personal property. And I may politically disagree with it, but I can also understand the economic impacts of it, right? And so what's going to end up happening is people aren't going to decide that they want to go back to only being able to vacation in a tiny shoebox in a giant tower. They still want more authentic experiences. And so what that's actually going to do, in my opinion, is properties that can be positioned where you're in alignment with zoning when you've got your local council on your side because you're actually designated tourist, which my property is designated as a tourist zoning. So we've got no issues there with the new Airbnb regulations. I think that we're going to see that blow up. I think accidentally I'll end up owning a handful of these resorts spread across North America. Maybe we'll eventually get into El Salvador. That's an area I'm actively researching as well, because it feels like it may become the Bitcoin capital of the world someday. And again, that's something I'd really like to participate in if it turns out to be true.
Got it. I promise after this question, we're going to get into the Bitcoin part. But since you're an accountant, I really want to ask, what's your average nightly rate for your Citadel, and what's the occupancy throughout the year that you have been doing it?
Sure. So it's all over the place, both in regards to pricing and occupancy. So we're very much a summer destination. So, those 16 weeks of summer is when we're going to make the core of our income. I haven't looked at the financials super recently. This year was our first year of full operations. I would estimate off the top of my head, probably 60 to 75% of our income comes from those 16 weeks, and the rest is going to be the shoulder period. Now, I plan to be very proactive, and I think that you can build these luxury aspirational destinations. So Isaac French is kind of a newcomer in the real estate Airbnb influencer space, but he recently just launched his project Live Oaks. He put about 2.3 million into it. He was in Waco, Texas, and he sold it in 2 years for 7 million while operating it profitably. I think there's going to be a lot of demand. I think that we're seeing PE firms and family offices and stuff like that really like these type of investments as well, because not only is it financially sound, but again, it kind of scratches a little bit of lifestyle design for the average investor, particularly if we're dealing with like a family office or a small PE firm. So I think that we're going to see, there's a new startup, Hotelier, I think is the one that acquired Isaac French's, but I think we're going to see these rolled out in a serial fashion. And so one of the ways that we're going to look at really increasing the revenue in our off season, because it is a huge missed opportunity right now, we should be able to double our revenue easily from where it is today, is by creating curated experiences. So one of the things that we're looking to do is partner up with like small and medium-sized influencers and weird little niches and have them host events at our retreat. So for example, why not find some guy on Instagram that's got 20 to 50,000 followers and he's the Iron Man guy? Well, this guy probably is making a decent lifestyle living, but he's probably not building an empire. And so that's where I can kind of come in. I think I've got a little bit of social media cred that gives me a halo effect as well when I interact with these individuals, but be like, hey man, I've got 22 acres and then I've got a national park across the road and surrounded by government land. Let's have you plan your own Ironman, and let's do it in the winter. And you can do ice bathing on my lake and use the sauna and this, that, and the other. And we'll create this custom package for 10, 20, 40 of your followers where they can come and have that intimate experience with you. Because one of the trends I'm personally fascinated by is what I see developing on Twitch. I don't know if you guys are following this at all or if your audience is, but these Twitch streamers, they are going to dominate media. They're going to dominate pop culture in the future. I know maybe some people already think I'm a boomer because I'm talking like this is a new revelation, but it really is extremely important to understand. These streamers are often streaming 8 to 10 hours a day for 6 to 7 days a week. Think about the exposure you have to your audience. Think about the indoctrination that's going on every single minute of that time period, right? It's why these one-to-many conversations like a podcast are so valuable. And so I think that what's going to end up happening is these parasocial relationships are going to evolve even further than anything we're currently aware of or experiencing. And what that's going to result in is people willing to pay a disproportionate amount of their disposable income in order to have one-of-a-kind unique experiences with someone that they've spent 10, 20,000 hours potentially over the course of their life with, right? Like there's people that will stream 3,000, 4,000 hours a year and have someone tune into every single stream. that's insane. That's unheard of before, right? Like no one could have ever had that lengthy conversation with one individual, let alone one to many. So again, I think that I'm hoping that I'm well positioned, the Citadel's well positioned to be able to tap into that and create these unique experiences for individuals that are seeking them.
So what's coming up this season is a Wim Hof and polar dip retreat at the Citadel only. Looking forward to it. But
yeah, you're welcome to plan one. Or if you know an influencer, if you are an influencer listening to this, feel free to slide into my DMs. Definitely happy to explore that stuff. And again, this to me is like the point of FU money. It's the point of being able to have financial freedom is like, I don't know, is this truly the most financially optimal decision for me to make? I don't think it is, right? I probably should have just kept grinding out the YouTube game, should have kept my mouth shut, should have just said what the algorithms wanted, and the algorithms would reward me, right? It's literally just a video game, social media, once you understand the rules. The frustrating part is when they change the rules on you mid-game. But again, it is what it is. So you can either choose to blaze your own trail or double down on the existing ones. And for myself, there's no doubt about it. I'm going to blaze a trail.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like a micro influencer. We have like 18,000 on YouTube. Nice. We have hundreds of students and all that. So yeah, maybe we can chat after. If you want to throw your whatever handle here that people can DM you in, then anyone's feel free to do that. And a really interesting part you mentioned on is the micro influencer side, because I saw Lululemon does the same thing. That's how Lululemon has a very high profit margin. And that's because they only cost them so little to get the influencer on board, get them new clothes or build the community for them. And they don't have to pay them that much for sponsors. That's how they stand out and keep a lot of the profit margin and make it a win-win-win, right? And I heard this not just from Lululemon. I have another friend who just sold his company for 55 million, right? They make artificial tattoos that stay on your body for 1 to 2 weeks, and he just sold it with his brother, sold it for 55 million. And that is your main strategy. Partner up with micro influencer and then get them to promote their stuff, and only cost them very little, but the reward, the ROI is so high.
Yeah.
Right? So I think
if you'll indulge me here, I'd love to rant on that a little bit, because I really do think that your average business owner is missing massive opportunities. So one, if you're in the business of being in business, you need to become an influencer to some extent. So what that means, like, I don't care if you make business cards for people, you should have a podcast about that. You should have some sort of digital footprint online that people can track you through. Again, it doesn't need to be 1,000 hours a year of content that you're cranking out, but anything will disproportionately put you in a better position than your competitors. But the thing about micro influencers that a lot of people don't understand is, like, one, the devil's in the details, like anything else. So understand, just because someone has 10,000 random followers on Instagram or YouTube or wherever doesn't inherently mean that they've got a strong audience, right? So like, really, if you're looking to sponsor someone, in my opinion, look into the engagement, right? What's going on in the comment section? How many bookmarks are going on? All those little digital details will allow you to understand the impact someone has. But someone that's got actually, like, and Cody, for all I know, this is you, 18,000 real followers on YouTube, that shit's extremely valuable. If you've got a deep relationship with them, if you're even seeing like 10% or more regularly engaged with your content, that's very valuable. And what people don't understand is, maybe it's cool to have a Ryan Reynolds sponsorship, but understand, like, he's one cancellation away from becoming irrelevant, because people don't have that same level of relationship with him. Where someone that, like, actually, is ride or die with me as a content creator to this day, they've been through the ups and downs, right? Like, they know what they're getting with Matt McKeever. There's almost nothing I could say or do within, like, my personal principles that would make them question me at this point. And so that's where people, again, don't understand that, like, these Twitch streamers, their audiences know them inside and out. They know all the personal details, right? Like, it actually makes them more bulletproof by being transparent. And right now, a lot of people think that the way to succeed on social media is through artificially curating a image. And it's just a matter of time before someone either curates a better image of you, or you get canceled because you're not living in alignment with the perceived identity that you're presenting to the average consumer of your content. And so, again, there's massive opportunities here. Businesses and investors should be taking advantage of this. Those of you that are inclined to create content, you should be doubling down on doing it. At the end of the day, though, understand it's a very slow feedback loop. you might get lucky and have a video go viral, but like you can also have a video go viral 2 or 3 years into your career and then go back to your original plateau. And that's okay. Like people have become so inoculated, in my opinion, to a million views. A million views is insane. The average person 40 years ago could never hope to impact a million people. But now it's pretty practical that you can probably screw around on TikTok long enough and something's going to click at one point in time. Now, again, can you take that 30-second impression on TikTok and convert it into a deeper relationship? That's where it really comes down to like what type of audience are you curating, what sort of content are you creating and presenting to them. But there's just so much opportunity out there. Yeah, I'm a huge believer in micro influencers. You don't need a million followers. You don't need 10 million views. All you need is a hardcore fan base, right? There's Y Combinator? I think one of the partners at Y Combinator wrote a great essay called "A Thousand True Fans," and then a editor from Wired actually went back and wrote a different essay, taking the same concept and calling it 100 True Fans. If you've got 100 true fans that are ride or die for you, that live for your content, and you can create $1,000 profit center that each one of them wants to participate on a yearly basis, like a conference, like an event at the Citadel, all of a sudden that's $100,000 a year net profit business, right? Like you come to a place like our property and be like, okay, what's it going to take to rent it out? $1,000 a person? Okay, we're going to charge 2,000. It's really as simple as that. And I think these almost like drop shipped experiences where you're able to present these micro influencers are going to become very valuable. And yet also at the same time, it's not going to be necessarily shiny. So you're not going to necessarily be Grant Cardone talking to tens of thousands of people in a Super Bowl stadium. Instead, you're just trying to carve out that niche of 100 or 200 like people that love you for you. And like, what a better way to make a living than to have people literally just want to support you and follow along on your journey.
It's crazy because we're seeing a shift like in real time from quantity over quality, and now it's shifting again to quality over quantity. Because when you mentioned like Twitch, that's a big one. I've been seeing so many things happening in the news, like with Twitch streamers, and like, I think right now cancel culture is still a relatively new thing for us, but at the same time, there are ways to combat that. And it's like what you're saying. Like I was seeing some stuff like gossip about someone on Twitch, and then I see the comments and it's all of their diehard OG fans from day one being like, nope, this is wrong. Nope, this is wrong. So it's like growing with that audience base is literally you're honing in on like the army that's going to defend you when they see stuff like that in the news. Like it's crazy that seeing that shift. So now it's like not all about having like 3 million followers, having 100,000 likes, but it's like, are you able to find that actual core that's going to stick with you throughout your entire career? And it's really weird. Like I'm still trying to wrap my mind around that change because it's quick.
Cool. Yeah. Echo to that. Are you using any of your social media experience to help build your crypto business? That can Nada talk about your IB52? Can you talk about that? Are you using any of your past experience to build that, and where's that going?
Sure. So for your audience, I don't know the level of sophistication when it comes to cryptocurrencies or Bitcoin. So I'll just give a really quick synopsis, at least in my view. So there's Bitcoin and then there's everything else. And so in the category of everything else is NFTs, it's cryptocurrencies, it's Ethereum, it's any other word that's not Bitcoin. And so that space is fascinating to me because it's a new way for capital and individuals to organize. And I don't know what happens in this space. It's the Wild West. People, one day are millionaires or billionaires. The next day they're public enemy number one. There's a lot of shady business, right? So whatever happens, the easier it is to transact, the more likely you are going to have speculators, bad actors, and straight up scammers entering the space. So like there do be dragons if you choose to walk the path of cryptocurrency or NFTs. So like, don't take this as financial advice. Buying Bitcoin, that is financial advice. I'm comfortable saying you should absolutely go buy Bitcoin. Everything else, more than a little risky. So please do your own due diligence there. But so Project LB52, what it was my foray or attempt to dabble in the space. And like anything, I kind of want to carve out a niche unique to myself. So there was a local rapper, a friend of mine, Dan, and essentially he was working a factory job while being an aspiring rapper. And, I liked the music he did. I loved his personality. He's more than just a musician. He really is a personality. And so right before COVID hit, I was having talks with Dan. I was trying to figure out, like, if I was in your shoes, how would I become a full-time artist, right? Like, how could I actually make my art? And like this idea that somehow you're going to rich off Spotify streams is just, it's not the thing. It honestly isn't, guys. What's going to happen is, again, you're going to build up a fan base of 100 or 200 hardcore fans that will come up to every show, or they'll buy your merch, right? They'll support everything you do because they love you and your content for what it is. And so we were kind of exploring that. And literally, I was like throwing out ideas to Dan, like, what about like, custom theme songs for bachelor or bachelorette parties? Like, what if you literally customized it and, I could pay you as a rapper and a writer. You organize a limo, you pick me and the boys up. We go to a recording studio and we get to goof around and kind of pretend like we're Drake, right? Or whatever your favorite rapper is, Russ. And I was like, I think that there's an experience there to be had that people would pay for. I was like, and I don't think that it needs to be, oh, like I'm getting to literally sit in the booth with Dr. Dre. I think it's, as long as I'm in here with a talented musician that knows what's going on, this will be a fun, silly experience. And it's so different than like going to a strip club and just getting blackout drunk, or what. I don't even know what millennials and Zoomers do now for their parties, but whatever you're doing, it's still probably less cool than what I was envisioning. And so joking a little there, and so in my opinion, I was like trying to figure out how he could generate enough revenue. And I just didn't think it was going to come from Spotify streams or selling CDs. And, NFTs started popping off. I saw all this stuff. I was like, man, I want to understand this better. And so I started dabbling with buying some NFTs. And I was like, Dan, I think that this might be the thing. I was like, there seems to be a lot of different ways to make money right now with NFT projects. This was literally back in the heyday. So I think like probably June 2021, or actually July 1st, 2021 is when he quit his day job, I'm pretty sure. So, we were literally like going into peak euphoria at that point in time. I couldn't have timed it better. But I was like, there's a couple different ways here. We can do these kind of pump and dump things that everyone seems to do, where you're like, there's a mystery box and there could be something really cool in this mystery box, but you don't know, just give me your money and we'll figure it out later. Or I was like, you could just try and sell custom audio creations. And that's what Project LB52 became. And I was like, and sell this to other NFT projects that want a theme song, right? Twitter Spaces was popping off at the time. I was like, this is an audio only experience. I was like, I think having sound tags, right? Like Gary Vee talks about sound tags and stuff like that. I was like, I think there's something to this. And so I was like, you should really lean hard into this. And so that's essentially what we did with Project LB52. I don't know exactly what the pricing is now, but when we launched it, essentially it was 1 ETH for a custom song. We sat down with a proper IP lawyer, wrote out a perfectly ironclad agreement where the person that bought the song off of us, they'd own all the IP behind it. So they could go use it for commercials or whatever. One of the things that a lot of social media content creators don't understand is like copyright law still exists on the internet. They're very slow to enforce it, but like you sharing a meme and trying to sell something, like that's actually against the law, right? Like you can follow Robert Freudland, I think it is, on Instagram and Twitter, and he's excellent for breaking this stuff down. So again, don't take my word for it. Go find an expert and like really understand what's going on here. But there's so many people that are sharing things that aren't stock images or aren't their own IP that like eventually they could get their hand slapped. And how unfortunate would it be to have something go crazy viral and then immediately have to collapse because like you got sued into oblivion, because that's the only times they really care, right? And so even like what people don't understand, and Robert does a great job on his Instagram of showing, is like, let's say, I don't even know who's famous, a Kardashian's walking down the street and holding a bag and you snap a photo of her. Well, like you're allowed to snap a photo of her, but if all of a sudden you as the brand use that photo to be like, look, a Kardashian's holding our handbag. Nope. Kardashians are going to sue you. They're going to get a bunch of money. They're going to get a cease and desist. That's just going to have to go off. And so that was kind of the niche we were trying to carve out with this Project LB52 NFT project. So I'd like to think that we were offering real value in exchange for value, where I think a lot of the other projects in the space were smoke and mirrors. They were promises. And again, just the nature of those markets just rewarded bad actors, people that could build hype cycles. And I think that what we saw was train after train of serial hype cycle, where people were just, raping and pillaging their audiences, for lack of a better word. And it was so unfortunate. We weren't a massive success. So I don't want anyone to think that I walked away with millions of dollars because of my NFT project. I mean, literally, we had limited our collection to 52 units. So best case scenario, we were going to make 52 ETH. But hey, you know what? ETH was, at the time we started, I think like maybe 2,000 or 3,000 American. It ended up getting up to like 5 at one point. But like that's $100,000 a year was kind of our goal. That would be a full-time living for someone that previously couldn't make as a living as a rapper. Those are the sort of like weird businesses I enjoy now, where again, it's kind of me getting to experiment or invert certain aspects of business. It's why I'm getting such a kick out of working with this food bank. Again, it's just these ideas of like bringing my personal experience and insights into areas where maybe otherwise people think it has to be one path or one way. But again, like, you know, fast forward 10 years from now, will Project LB52 be the thing I'm known for? Probably not. It'll probably just be in the dustbin of another project where Matt tried, had moderate success, and then either decided to pivot, it failed, we just walked away, whatever the case may be. But the lessons you learn throughout that process, right? Like, because of it, you know, I committed to doing a daily Twitter space 5 days a week. And we did that for a year. And that got me to understand Twitter space culture. I was able to build up a large network of other project founders that weren't scammers. So again, I don't know when the right time or place for me to tap that stuff again will be, but the concept of, you know, digital marketplaces that represent either digital products or are tethered to real life physical products, that stuff's going to be here to stay. Maybe it doesn't have to be on the Ethereum blockchain or this blockchain or whatever, but the principles behind it will come up again some way.
That's very cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing all that. Like you just go, like you show so many golden nuggets that a lot of people might not understand, but people who has done it will understand it, right? So this is the question always in me because you keep saying about the FU money. I want to ask you, what is your FU money in your mind? What is that FU money?
It's a great question. And so it is very personal. I'll share with what my number is. But first, I just wanted to lay out a framework of how I think a person should determine it. So like, one, you got to know yourself, right? How risk adverse are you? You know, what is your personal spend? What level would you be willing to drop your personal spend to in order to still feel like you've got a quality of life that you're happy with? Again, that's going to vary dramatically from person to person. I know people that couldn't imagine living off of only $10,000 a month. You know, for me, I literally would have to go on my way to spend that amount of money. Like I would have to take up weird hobbies in order to burn that. Because it's not getting spent on fashion.
Just come back to Toronto. You can easily spend 5,000, no problem. Just come back to Toronto.
Yeah, well, yeah. Again, like to me, that would be a decrease in quality of life living in an urban environment. I'd be like, oh my god, like you'd have to pay me to like a little tangent here, but this year, the Canada Bitcoin conference was downtown Toronto. Oh my god. I was so angry. Like it's Friday, 3 p.m. I'm downtown Toronto, stuck in traffic. It's a one-way street, but my Google Maps somehow didn't know it was a one-way street, so you couldn't make the turn. And you're like, well, I'll just make the next block, and and all of a sudden, anyways, no, that's not my quality of life. But again, yeah, you're right. It'd be hard to only spend $5,000 a month if you're renting a place, particularly in Toronto, I imagine, in this economic environment. But so you need to understand yourself. You need to understand where you're headed in life. I personally think that like FU money could be as little as 100 grand. I think that you could be set for life on 100 grand still.
How do you do that on 100 grand?
Yeah, not in downtown Toronto, not in LA or New York or anything like that. But yeah, you absolutely can get by on that. And like, you know, I could spitball real quick, but like you could use that $100,000 to buy a duplex or a fourplex in the middle of nowhere, even go 50% down because, hey, you've got no job because this is FU money we're playing with. And all of a sudden, you'd be able to get a mortgage. You'd be able to cash flow enough that you could afford your rent, afford the basic necessities of life. And again, far too often, I think people think of FIRE or FU money as being a permanent number. And so it's like, well, you know, for the rest of my life, I might need $10 million to get by. So I need $10 million. Well, like one thing I know about me is I'm not going to spend I'm still under 40 here. I'm not going to spend the next 40 years creating zero value. It turns out, thankfully, in a capitalist society, if you create value, somehow someone's going to reward you. Usually it's going to be through money, right? So they're literally going to be like, you're so good at this now that I insist that you take some of my money. But it could also be favor economy. It could be your reputation. There's a lot of different capital that you could accumulate over those next 40 years. So I view FU money really as a springboard, as in like, this is my last line of defense. I know I can say and do anything I want and I'll be fine. Because worst case scenario, I've got that 100 grand and I can work a job at McDonald's, right? Until they're all robots, or I can whatever. And so again, understanding that I think is really important for me. If I've got $500,000 in net worth, I think that I'm ridiculously wealthy. Again, I didn't grow up with a lot of money. My baseline's pretty low, as we've already established, but like that's enough. Like, there's no way I should be able to fuck up my life so much that I need to dip into more than $500,000, in my opinion. Because again, I'm going to create some value, even if it's just accidentally somehow. And so I think that that's important when thinking about FU money. I also think that, like, Bill Gates has this quote that people overestimate what they can accomplish in a year and underestimate what they can accomplish in 10 years. And that's been a reoccurring theme in my life, and a reoccurring theme in just about everyone's life that I've ever met, is that the extremely productive people, they just like set out to start doing something, and before they know it, they've accidentally amassed this empire, right? Whether it's like the plumber that went out on his own just because he hated having a boss or doing the timesheet or wanted to slightly rework his work schedule, or whether it's the real estate investor, the CPA that starts their own practice, whatever it is. And so again, FU money can come in a lot of different forms, and it doesn't need to be a lot. Like, I personally think if you've got one Bitcoin to your name and you can afford to never spend that.
Okay, that's it. That's it. I have it now. That's it. Done. I have one Bitcoin. That's it.
With like L2 solutions, right, and L3 layers and things of that nature. This idea, and I'm a firm believer in it, that if we end up going down the path that I view as most optimistic for humanity, we're going to literally see entire cities carved out of raw land because one wealthy Bitcoiner moved there. Like, there's a great book I recommend everyone look at called The Sovereign Individual. It was written well before Bitcoin. It was written well before any cryptocurrencies, but it predicted a lot of these trends. And it's because I think they are kind of trends. I think that there's certain times that technology and communication create a situation where centralization is favored. And then I think that there's times where the opposite's true and decentralization's favored. And I think that, for the longest time, we've been headed towards kind of like a one world government or extreme centralization. I think that we're on the cusp of swinging back in the opposite direction. The classic saying that history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. I think that history is also, in public sentiment, is a pendulum, and it swings. And I think that we've just hit a precipice, and we're about to come back in the other direction.
Man, this is so cool. You're like hiding up. I want to say hiding up. You are like way up there, living your citadel, but you still have your pulse on everything. And you can live off $100,000. Your FU money is $500,000. Now, have you ever imagined, I don't know, do you have kids now, Matt? Okay. Have you ever have kids where maybe, I'm not going to go private to that point, but have you ever thought about, are you going to stay up there forever, or are you ever going to come back to the civilization? And you kind of have to face the reality of how just have to cope with all these things. Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, certainly. So, if there's one characteristic of mine that's always been true, it's overthinking things. So I've definitely thought about that and just about anything else. So yeah, there are trade-offs with choosing to live in a low population density area. Absolutely. I think that technology helps smooth a lot of the pain points that previously existed, right? Like, I've got Starlink internet. I'm able to connect as if I've got fiber optic, essentially. And so, where before I wouldn't, right? When I moved up there, before I got Starlink, the best thing I could get was on a waiting list for Execulink. And like, someday I might be able to get a few megabytes from them, but that was going to be it, versus like, nope, we're good. I can live in the 21st century. So there are trade-offs there. I personally don't think it's beneficial to outsource the education of one's children. I think that, in fact, it's one of the biggest mistakes we've made as a society over the last 100 years, is choosing to go with the Prussian education model. In my area, there's a lot of people that homeschool, private school, and pod school. I really like the idea of pod schooling. To me, it kind of scratches the best of both worlds. And so, I don't have kids. My sister has 3. I've done just about everything in my power to try and convince her and her family that it would be a net benefit for them to move up to the Citadel and, live out in the sticks with me. It's outside of normal for most people, that sort of proposition. So there's probably a low probability they'll ever take me up on it. But I personally, like, these pod schooled kids I meet, they're adults. They're tiny little adults, fully capable of themselves, fully capable of listening to rules, regulations, and instructions and things like that. And like, they've got a work ethic that I grew up on a farm, so I'm very biased. I think country kids work harder than city kids. It just is. And again, I could be very wrong on that. I also have a bias that I think immigrants often work a lot harder than native citizens. And I think it's the hoops that you jump through in order to get there, right? That actually creates that, right? The person you have to become to pack up all your bags and move to the middle of nowhere, or the person you have to be to pack up all your bags and move to a different country, oftentimes a country with different cultures and languages and all the baggage that comes with that. Like, that's a bold person. That's a risk taker. That's someone that's willing to step outside their comfort zone. And so similarly with like, country kids or these pod school kids that I'm coming across, it feels like they're from a completely different culture. And now I don't want anyone to mistake and think that I'm promoting some sort of Luddite existence, because that's not the goal. I think that you can have the best of both worlds now, particularly in this digital economy where, everyone's like, let's move to Thailand and live there and and like, absolutely. If that's your, slice of pie, go after it. But I think that far too often people overlook like, well, why don't I just live in one of the small lakes near Muskoka? Why don't I live in, one of the, Mile Lakes, or why don't I move up to Nestor Falls where Matt is and be able to have my dollar stretched so much further? I personally like, you can still in the nearest town to me, which is population of 10,000, you can find a house for under 150,000 that's livable, right? It's still a thing, but there's trade-offs that are associated with that, right? Like, where's the nearest Starbucks? Yeah, it's a 5-hour drive. Okay, like, is Starbucks really worth that? Is Starbucks worth like mortgaging your entire life? And I don't think it is. And I think that we're slowly seeing, as individuals and families start doing the mental math and understanding that they can stretch their dollars if they're willing to live a little bit outside of normal. And so that's one of the things I'm trying to represent. Again, I know it's not for everyone. I'm personally on the fence. If the right opportunity comes, I would love to have a big family. I would love to help educate my children. It's one of the things that like I even considered at age 31 when I quit the rat race, was like, I was like, yeah, I like the idea of being able to teach my kids, because, each of us has so many personal imprints that make us the person we are today. But like, one of the things I associate to my success is just liking reading. And the reason I like reading is because I had a grandmother that was a school teacher, and she would sit and read with me. And like, she decided that reading with her grandson was fun. So her grandson's going to mirror that behavior. Like, it's just that simple, right? Like, I see it when I'm with my nieces and nephew. If I've got my device out and I'm glued to it, like, they want a device. They want on my device, right? They want to, but like the other night, we were like, let's do a movie night. And it wasn't a good movie. I don't recommend Angry Birds, but it's what they wanted. So it's what we watched. And at the start, you literally got 3 little kids with a device and the movie playing. I'm like, I'm going to leave my phone in my pocket the entire time. Every now and then they'd look up from their device, catch the movie a bit, or look at me. And by the end of it, they'd all put their devices away and they were all watching the movie. And it's because like humans are naturally mirroring animals, right? Like, it's a coping mechanism to survive, right? You don't want to be ostracized. You don't want to be an outsider. And unfortunately, those instincts are still valuable, but oftentimes they sometimes lead us in the wrong direction, or we jump to the wrong conclusions. And so the one thing I'd really encourage people is just like challenge yourself to think, what's the full breadth of options available to you, right? There's this idea of first principles thinking, or you can even take it further and talk about zero principles thinking. But first principles thinking is, let's just start over. Okay. And that's how I approach financial independence, was let's start over. Okay. What do I actually need to be financially independent? Well, I'm pretty sure I need shelter. I need food. I probably need some form of relationships or companionship or social connectivity.
Yeah.
After that, it starts to be like options, right? Like, you can, for $100, you could clothe yourself for the rest of your life, right? Like, you would literally spend it on gas and go on Facebook Marketplace, and everyone here's free clothes, just please take them off my hands. Boom, you're set for life now for clothes. Like, there's so many novel solutions available. And one of the criticisms people will attack, or, if I'm trying to steel man against my position here, is the idea of like, well, it's not scalable. Everyone can't go do that. Yeah. But I don't want everyone being a doctor or everyone being a garbage man either, right? Like, I want people carving out the niches where they're best suited for. And so I think that that's one thing that I would really love to impress upon your audience, other than they need to study Bitcoin more. It's just they need to listen to themselves more. They need to really sit down and ask themselves the hard questions, because no one else is going to plan your life. No one else should care more about your life than you do. No one's going to care more about your money than you do. No one's going to care about your health more than you do. You need to take extreme personal responsibility for it. And so one of the concepts that you'll regularly hear come up in Bitcoin culture is this concept of time preference. And right now we live in a high time preference society. We should strive to live in a low time preference society. The simplest way I can explain it is like, you've all probably heard of the marshmallow test. This idea of sit a toddler down, tell them, here's a marshmallow. if you can hold off for 2 minutes, I'll double it and you'll get 2 marshmallows. Well, almost no toddlers can actually pass the marshmallow test because they're high time preference, right? They're just thinking, I want that sugar hit now. I'm grabbing it. But the only way you get to a podcast where you've got dozens of episodes, you get to 8,000 subscribers on YouTube, or you build up a real estate portfolio or an investment portfolio or whatever, is by consistently showing that you're capable of conforming to a low time preference mentality, right? High time preference mentality. It's the reason people eat fast food. It's the reason people are fat. It's because they're not understanding the feedback loops. Like, again, like being fat's actually a very simple formula. Being rich is a very simple formula, right? To be less fat, spend more calories than you're consuming. If you want to be rich, make more money than you're spending. Like, these are very simple principles. And yes, we can extrapolate and make them abstract and get into complications and devils in the details. But if you're not living in alignment with those sort of principles, like, you're honestly just spinning plates and hoping that things work out.
100%. You got to break that addiction with instant gratification. That's the biggest one too. We're definitely gonna have to do like a part 2, man. I feel like I'm not done.
Sure. I think there's like, Matt, really thanks for your time. And I feel like it's been a while people hear you coming out, especially on the podcast. So thanks for doing that. If you're open to it, we can do a part 2 maybe in 6 months or a year time. Then we can update on what you're up to again. Maybe you come back to Toronto. Who knows? Or you're in.
Yeah. Hey, in 6 months, the Bitcoin halving will happen. So everyone that's going to listen to this today that thinks I'm crazy about Bitcoin, I promise you, come the end of April 2024, you're going to want to hear what I have to say about Bitcoin. So yeah, that sounds good to me.
So we'll probably have you, make a prediction now. You come back right after. If you're wrong, we'll never see you again.
Well, here's the prediction. Bitcoin goes up. Bitcoin eats the world. Bitcoin is hope. Bitcoin is, honestly, if you want a juster, fairer society, you need rules that never change. Bitcoin is the answer to that. And I think that it's a very simple concept, and yet you could spend a lifetime studying it and never fully understand everything. It's insane to make price predictions. Anyone that thinks they have a crystal ball, they don't, right? Like, just like when I thought I was literally crazy when Tiff Macklin said interest rates were going to be low forever. Like, I think I probably was in that moment crazy, but it turns out history has shown that, like, no, it turns out that there are some consequences to loose monetary policy. We'll see where we go in the future in regards to interest rates. But the one thing I can tell you with Bitcoin is that, barring the end of the world as we know it, the complete decay of all society as we experience it, I believe that Bitcoin will hit a new all-time high in 2024. And again, if it doesn't, that's not the point. The point is that there's a tiny portion of your productivity that you can siphon off and ensure that the parasite class never gets to touch. If you don't get that, to quote Satoshi, who's the creator of Bitcoin, I don't have the time or inclination to explain it to you. But when you're ready, like, tap me and I will talk to to any of your audience. I'll talk your ear off Bitcoin. You ask me for real estate. No, I can sniff it out if you're secretly just trying to get my real estate advice. But if you're sincere about learning about Bitcoin, start with a book like the Bitcoin Standard. Hit me up in the DMs. I can introduce you to all kinds of wonderful people in the Bitcoin space. There needs to be more local events. People need to understand that the ultimate goal with Bitcoin is building a circular economy, and that can be done today. It's not necessarily easy, but understand, again, that perception of the difficulty to overcome to get comfortable with Bitcoin, that's the reason that people are going to make undue amounts of wealth, because eventually I personally believe that the entire world should adopt Bitcoin, and I hope they do.
100%. That is exactly why I do. And honestly, this is the alpha that we've all been waiting for. I love it. Thank you so much, Matt. I really appreciate that. We're definitely going to have to do a part 2.
And before people tune off, I just want to say, if you guys are still listening to this up until this point, and more than 1 hour of non-conventional concept about crypto, about real estate, about Matt McKeever's brain, and how our wealth buster is trying to continue to bust wealth myth, you definitely should consider subscribe, and share this with 5 people that you know, because I know you stay until this point. You love it so much. Okay.
Bitcoin to the moon.